topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs Ascending. This isn't just a podcast. This is a call to action for all entrepreneurs who are tired of seeing their businesses and communities suffer while big business continues to grow by the billions. We challenge you to apply the content of our time together to create businesses that your clients can't resist, your employees love to work for, and your communities can depend on. Now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending.
Yes, now is the time for Entrepreneurs Ascending. So that means it's your time. It's our time. And it's a great time to learn more about training and how to use your training time wisely. Not sure why I'm saying time so much, but it seemed like it worked. All right, so training, it is one of those things that is just so easy to overlook. In talking with hundreds of, if not thousands of entrepreneurs throughout my years of consulting, it's funny how quickly people are like, well, they should have just picked it up, or how quickly they are to move on and think somebody's got it. And that's just not the case. I think so often we're more focused on just trying to get done with the task of training as opposed to making sure that the person that we're training is truly educated, equipped, and empowered to be able to take it, run with it, and perform at a higher level. And that's why we have Andy Sterie on with us today. He's an expert in training, and he's developed some very powerful systems for helping businesses ensure that they're not just training for compliance, but they're training for performance. And so after this short break, we're going to introduce Andy, get into his entrepreneurial journey a little bit, and then dig into what is that difference and how do we start helping you apply it in your business so that you can quit saying, oh, gosh, I wish they just had some more common sense, or, oh, my gosh, I told them 1,000,000 times. We got to get past that. All right. It's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that your team gets it. We're going to get into that right after our sponsor time.
Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flora, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com. All right, and welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing real well, thank you.
Good. You're looking good.
Thanks. You too.
Yeah, you got a glow about you. So that's
it's the coffee.
Well, thanks so much for coming on here today. And can you tell the audience a little bit more about your background with training as kind of that focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my background with training really started at a very young age. I got to grow up. My parents had 9 kids for whatever reason, and so oftentimes, whatever I would see my parents do was very, very segmented and repeatable. Like I remember growing up, watching my mom make sandwiches for the week for her kids, and she's got 18 pieces of bread on a cutting board, and she's going through this process of making peanut butter, jelly, or turkey and cheese, or whatever it might have been. So that's kind of where, and then coming in at number 4 out of 9. Having the opportunity to help raise my younger brothers and sisters. And now that I've got kids of my own, it's just like I see a lot that was done when I was younger and a lot that I'm implementing now. in my own training / parenting program too. So started at a very young age. And when I got involved, kind of started to work, that's really when, bringing on new hires became kind of a passion of mine, or working with new employees, because, it's always important to set those up for success, set them up for success.
Yeah, so that's interesting that perhaps there was a little bit of inspiration of being kind of in the middle there of helping the younger siblings learn and grow and learn the systems that the family has for success. It kind of flowed into some inspiration with helping employees.
Yeah, absolutely, it did.
So, what's the name of your company? I don't think that we hit upon that.
Impact Training Solutions.
Right,
So,
Impact Training Solutions. And where can people find that website?
ImpactCTC.com.
Impact CT. All right, awesome.
Training courses.
ImpactCTC.com. Good. And we'll circle back around to that just in case you didn't catch it. But so Impact Solutions. So tell me about why is it called Impact Solutions? That's an interesting term for training.
It is. Impact Training Solutions. It's called Impact because I'm wanting to make an impact bigger than just myself, bigger than just coaching one person, or bigger than just writing one performance training journal. And it's a training solutions company because everybody has training. Everybody has their own training program for the most part, whether it's, hey, we just take on a new hire and they learn by doing. And it's not really a formal process. So I want to offer solutions that'll help formalize that process.
So what made you decide, what was that moment that made you decide that you wanted to go out and do this on your own?
That started, I would say back in 2017, 2018. I was in sales at the time. I have a sales mentor that I work with, a sales coach, and I've been working with him since about 2016, 2017, but I just saw the impact that he had on my sales career. It really started with giving my sales process, putting a process in place to have that. And then the reason what got me into training was one of the first pieces of professional feedback I got in my sales career was, you don't have confidence. And I thought that's kind of a thing to say. That's a big thing to say. So where does confidence come from? And it's the definition of confidence I was given was very different from what I would actually consider confidence. It was, whenever you say something, just sound really positive or just sound really sure of it. And there's a little bit of that, but that's not real confidence. And so the other thing that really took my sales to the next level was not only having a process, but finding confidence or finding a principle to sell from. And it started as a sales training because it's very impact training started as a sales training because a lot of people understand I need to have a process, but they're missing the principle. And oftentimes when you start in sales, the principle is, I want to make money. When my principle shifted from I want to make money to everyone's my best friend and I want to get them the best solution for them, that's really when my sales training or when my sales career took off. And so I rolled that into a training program. And then I shortly realized everyone has sales training. And where my heart ended up going, or what I ended up really having a heart for, is new hires and wanting to set them up for success because they don't always come on as a very confident person. So, it became important to me to invent a process to help set those new hires up for success. And that's where the Stuck Less process came from. And that's where some of the training solutions come from too. So I don't only have just that one process. I also have training workbooks. I have training performance journals that help kind of extract your existing team's experience and turn it into a teachable training program.
Okay. Well, we'll have to get into that a little bit more here soon. But why do you choose to do it on your own as opposed to just doing it within larger companies? Because I know you also do some work within larger companies, but to go out on your own, what is so special about that impact that you can make?
I believe the coaching and consulting side of things the entrepreneurial side of things takes to keep it unique and to keep it impactful, to keep it something that, if I'm working with a client and they're struggling in one particular way, I'm not just going to say, well, I'm only limited to helping you with new hire training. I'm also going to help. Let's talk about how we can develop a better feedback program for your new hires, and so really to have the flexibility and to have the freedom to do it the way that I see fit, or the way that just works best for my client. That's why I'm doing it on my own.
That's awesome. So it gives you that flexibility and freedom to basically bring what you're passionate about and being able to focus on that, and then being able to improve it. Because it sounds like it kind of comes back to your principle of everybody's your best friend and you want the best solution for them. So I guess it allows you that flexibility to make sure that you're doing it doing it in a way that's best for them. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say. Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Okay. All right. So what really motivates you as you start your day and you think about, that impact? How do you get motivated when you first wake up?
Well, sometimes it's my 4-year-old walking in the room and saying, "Hey, it's 5:00. Can we have some snuggle time before getting ready?" But really getting up, wanting to make that impact, realizing that there's so many companies out there, and there's so many new hires, especially during this great, I guess, reshuffle, if you want to call it that. To know that there are people out there who are starting jobs and then getting immediately frustrated, that they're immediately getting disgruntled, and they might spend those first 90 days, instead of really focusing trying to learn their job, they might spend those first 90 days looking for a new job. And that doesn't help anybody's retention numbers. That's not going to help people act as a cohesive team. So that's an impact that I know I can make.
So if you're looking back at your career, right, and the defining moments, when was a moment, like a specific moment, when it just struck you that this training is just all wrong? You don't have to give the name of the exact company, but
no,
that you might have been working for.
No.
All right.
No
names and email addresses.
I actually started phones, addresses, names, pictures, LinkedIn profiles, all that good stuff.
Send your hate mail to
and glitter bombs too. I had started a job, and it was a very complex job. And I've got primarily a sales and service background, but I started a new job in operations. And it was the process of training for them was, you're going to spend a week doing this, you're going to spend a week doing this, you're going to spend a week doing this, and then you're going to after 4 weeks, you're going to know the job well enough. And I was on a bus ride, and I actually was with one of my fellow employees. And I remember her saying, on the bus ride in, she was hired two weeks before I was, and I was asking her about her training experience. And she says, I know I'm not ready because of this the thing that we covered in the first week. I'm not ready. I don't understand it. I don't feel like I can tell my manager that I'm not ready for it. And I remember thinking, oh man, what? So that's kind of when it all clicked. And I thought, I really need to take this process and flesh it out more.
So it was was it 4 weeks later and she's still not certain about what was taught?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was very much, it was 4 weeks later. It was, okay, you're coming up on the end of your 4 weeks. You better be ready to sink or swim. And, when you have the thought process or that mindset of, we have a set schedule for you. You're not a person. You're not a special project. You're a schedule, and you're going to be done and ready by the end. That creates a lot of pressure in that experience.
So if you're thinking about like that moment where you thought that was the worst, or just clicked that something's wrong, what about in juxtaposition of a moment when you're like, wow, this training system is on point or on fleek? Do they still do the kids still say on fleek? I don't.
On fleek. In a while, in a hot minute.
In a hot minute.
So yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen where maybe it's not this official training program, but there's a moment, or there was this really great company where the employees would meet just to have, one-to-many conversations, and it took place at the end of the day. It was an unofficial scheduled, it was an unofficial meeting, but you could still take your questions, take your concerns, take your the things that you might have noticed throughout the day to this team meeting, and everybody talks about it. And so that was an opportunity, or that was a moment where I thought, yeah, this is really good. There's a lot more coaching going on here for new hires than they think.
Wow, that's interesting that it's some sort of like unofficial. That's interesting. So how did that start? Did you ever find out like how that began?
I did. When the lady who put this meeting together, when she got hired into the role, she had a manager who said, "Look, you have 3 questions a day, and if they're good questions, I'll answer them." So she kind of got burned to the point where she just kind of developed this heart for new hires too. So
Interesting. Okay. But it wasn't necessarily like an official meeting, or was it more of just that was like an open meeting, like, hey, come on in for some Q&A?
yeah, it's an open Q&A meeting type.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So looking back and thinking about like where you're at now and the many years of good and the bad trainings, what do you think that you would tell like your 16-year-old self if you got a chance to send a message or sit down and have a conversation?
Oh man, it's not you, it's them. That's really what I would have to say. It's, realize that training is one of those things where oftentimes it's, hey, we think that people learn better by doing versus by training. And I think the stat on that is 65% of people learn by doing, which really, if you turn that upside down, what is that? 35% of trainers really know what they're doing, or they understand how to communicate effectively. So,
wow. Yeah. Because I know whenever I'm doing sales training or I mean, because even in sales, you can look at sales and marketing as kind of an educational process, maybe even kind of training your customers in some ways. But we talk about VAC, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So how important is it to include each of these different types of learning styles in a good training system then?
Oh, I think you got to mix it up.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they're communicating well, and it turns out they might not be. So absolutely, think about the different modalities. I'm really big on that because there's so many different ways of learning. I didn't know for a long, long time that I was actually an auditory learner, which means I really need to focus on what I'm hearing and to take it in that way, to take in information that way. And I think auditory learners make up a very small percentage of learners.
Mm-hmm.
And so to get these jobs, or to try to watch a process take place, or even try to do it myself, to first of all understand your type of learning, I think that's a key first step. But then also to understand that other people learn different ways. So we've got to mix it up, because you never know when information might be sticky.
Okay.
What might make it help stick for somebody else.
That's a good point. So I wanted to circle back around to what you were talking about, process with principle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really interesting phrase there, process with principle. Can you flesh that out a little bit more about what that means?
Process with principle. In my own experience, making sure that you have an effective principle, one that doesn't just say, I'm here to make money. Because everybody's motivation, oftentimes when you first hop into sales, or it's I want to make money.
Yeah.
And so to have the principle of I'm here to make money, really making sure that, to me, whenever a salesman is talking to me and that's their principle, it just kind of reeks. But then to have the right process, or to have the right principle of everyone's my best friend, that's my principle for me. And that is what I believe makes a great salesperson.
So what are your core values? What are your like top 3 core values as an entrepreneur and as a trainer?
There's a really good TED Talk a while back, and I believe the gentleman was Ira Wolf. And something that he shared was VUCA, or vision plus understanding plus community equals abundance, which is positive change for all. And so that's a big motivator for me, is realizing first that there is abundance out there. And that's abundance that I can tap into by helping enough people. Once it kind of goes into what Zig Ziglar said, over help enough people get what they want, and you can get what you want. So positive change for all is why I'm doing what I'm doing, making that impact.
Making that impact. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that there's so much to unpack, to make that impact on the training. I want to go ahead and jump to our sponsorship, or a sponsor message here, and then we're going to come right back and we're going to really start digging into first of all, I think that first question that I'm going to have whenever we come back. So just get ready. You're going to have like 30 seconds to prep.
Okay.
I know you're already ready for this, but what is that difference between compliance and performance training? So we'll come back and we'll dig into that.
Have you been suffering from chronic pain, disease, or sleep disorders? Did you know that 75 to 90% of disease is caused by inflammation in the body? The sad truth is, most doctors just treat symptoms rather than finding and fixing root causes of inflammation. If you want to fix your health problems, then finding and fixing the cause of the inflammation is a must. It's time to demand this for your health care and start living life to its fullest again. Book a discovery appointment with the Functional Health Team founder, Dr. Flory, to get your answers ASAP at www.functionalhealthteam.com.
All right, and we're back. And in the first section, we were talking a little bit about Andy's journey as an entrepreneur and what drives him. And now we're going to dig into the difference between performance and compliance training, and how you can take actions in your business to effectively, quit complaining all the time about people not getting it, or people not having common sense, or any. What else have you heard people say, Andy?
Well, when you say they just don't get it, I've seen a lot of people lose their temper and say, "Well, this person just doesn't get it." I actually experienced one of my previous coworkers go from our company to a competitor company and actually rise up into leadership there. So I think the person very much did get it. There's just a lot assumed there. Maybe the communication method, or VAC, you're talking about visual, auditory, kinesthetic. The teaching method might not have been right. So
I've heard that a lot working with a lot of entrepreneurs. The complaining about just people not getting it, or I've told them a million times, or oh my gosh, do I have to spell it out for you? Which I'm like, well, you do. You should.
Absolutely.
Write it down with words.
Well, yeah, and I think the biggest they don't get it is, when it comes time to train a new hire, even to try to coach somebody else, you're not considering all the information that goes into making a decision.
Yeah.
And so you're not training people how to make decisions. You're just directing them to make a decision. And you say, okay, well, this is what's happening. I remember very clearly one of my coworkers in a previous job was asking this question over, hey, this. It was over. It was in operations, and a smart kid. But the way he was asking his question, he was asking not what do I have to do now, but that's what the management was trying to tell him. Okay, well, this happened, so you need to make this one decision. And so many times, instead of teaching the whole decision making process, we just get caught up in, I'm going to give you direction, and you're going to follow direction, and that's not very sticky information. That's not explaining the why behind the why, or even the why. It's just, A happens, so you have to B.
So if, in terms of that question of what's the difference between compliance and performance, it sounds like that might be part of it. Let's flush that out a little bit. So what is the key difference between compliance and performance training?
Teaching situational awareness, teaching how to make that decision. Compliance is, hey, we sent you this document, you reviewed this document, you're good. It's more of a function of HR. It's very important. I mean, there's a lot of compliance training that, you might follow up with a quiz at the end. That's one way to make sure that people have taken the compliance training seriously. But performance training comes down to teaching people really how to look at what's going on, not just see that there's a problem, but to look at the decision-making landscape as a whole and say, okay, I understand that the reason why I'm in this situation, the reason why I need to make this next decision is because X, Y, or Z might have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And now, performance training not only says X, Y, or Z might have happened, therefore I have to make a decision, but it's also understanding after I make this decision, what impact is that going to have? What's that going to start? What process is that going to start? So understanding calls to action,
Okay.
And I mean that if you're in the middle of a process and all of a sudden you might hear something or get a phone call or get an email, you're going to have to change gears. Compliance training says change gears. Performance training says, okay, well, here's why we need to change gears, or here's how we can. So here's the call to action that you need to either listen for or see to really understand what's going on.
So as America kind of continues to progress towards the culture, the millennial culture, and it seems like people ask more questions and they want to know more of the why. Is that fair to say that's kind of expanding, where people are kind of demanding that more?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are demanding it more. I just don't think they're demanding it the right way or asking the right questions.
Interesting. Okay. Tell me more about that.
I think the millennial culture is you want to meet them where they are. You want to be able to have that empathy and be able to look at it, because the millennial age gap is what's the upper end there? Is the upper end closer to 40?
It's getting pretty close to 40 these days. I think, it's getting up there. So what are the other Gen Z,
Gen Z and Gen Yeet, I think.
Yeah. Gen Yeet.
gotta be Gen Yeet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my youngest, she's 7, and I hear saying Yeet all the time. But so yeah, it could be Gen Yeet. You could be right. Yeah.
Yeah, but consider all the technology changes that have happened since millennials first entered the workforce. We were using fax machines when I got started.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can't remember the last time I even sent a fax or got one.
Right.
Years.
Right.
So even though it's one generation, you got to consider all the different changes that have happened.
It's one of those things that I hear people complain about, that I just give them a paycheck. They just need to do what they're told. And I think that was very common. And the reason I asked is because I feel like that was acceptable maybe 20, 30 years ago ish. That was just kind of like how it is. But it seems like the culture has progressed. And there's other cultures in the world where it's not as expected to tell me the why, or it's maybe even rude to say, okay, tell me why, help me understand that. Right?
Yeah, help me understand.
Yeah, help me understand. But it seems like that's a lot more expected. Now, what are the pros and cons of teaching a decision-making process versus just a compliance understanding?
Cons, just right off the bat, it takes longer, and not everyone is equipped to teach a decision-making process, or they might not have the patience to do that. Which is where I would say Impact Training Solutions, that's the gap we're filling. Is we're not only going to teach you how to develop this training program, but I'm also going to coach you on how to coach. I'm going to teach you how to teach, and then you can take that and you can teach your peers that. That's part of making that impact. It's might be a 3-month coaching session or a 3-month coaching gig, but teaching people how to teach.
Yeah,
teaching them how to teach others how to fish.
Yeah, I've definitely worked with folks myself as well that they don't necessarily know how to teach. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners who are kind of like on that disc, that more dominant personality, more task oriented, more kind of bottom line oriented, who are just kind of like, they kind of want to keep moving.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that makes them great as an entrepreneur, though. Like they're always moving forward and charging forward. But sometimes it can be hard to take that step back, because you said it takes more time.
Mhm.
What are the benefits, though, of taking that time and teaching them? How does that typically play out as a win-win scenario for a company?
Well, when you're actually taking that time, I think the pro is also the flip side of that con is that as you're taking the time to really explain, to really teach, to really adapt what you're saying to that new hire, the information is going to stick better. And so even though you're spending more time, ultimately you're going to spend less time.
Yeah.
I think it's on average, people take about 9 months to a year to get acclimated to a job. If you can take the time early on, and if you can reevaluate how you're training, then you could shave 2-3 months off. I think that's very reasonable. I think even shaving a month off of that to having somebody who's fully competent in their job a month earlier, that's extremely valuable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and some of this plays in, I think, into kind of the way that the brain learns and works, right? It's not kind of just like a computer where you move a file into a, and drop that file and now all that
Matrix,
information's there. It's our brain works in associations, right? So if we can, how does that the way that our brain works in terms of association, how does that fit in with this idea of teaching the decision-making process? Did I ask that in a good way?
Well, I think it's definitely an interesting way of asking it. Associations. So there's a couple of really great. I'm blanking. Evidence-based learnings or evidence-based teaching, and one of those is overcorrection. So what people have found is that if you issue a test before you even teach anybody the material, the brain will remember the right answers better. Think about, learning somebody's name. You're going to really flub somebody's name once. You're never going to forget that. So your brain is overcorrecting. Your brain's making that association saying, oh my gosh, okay, there's clearly a gap here in my information or my understanding. And, being able to associate the right information or fill that gap in, being aware of the gap is going to help you fill that gap better. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the way that I think the decision-making process, and maybe we can dig into that decision-making process here in a second, but whenever you can, I think, connect those dots between the whys, the causes or the situations, so that people can kind of really recognize that, because you said situational awareness. So, when you walk in the room, being able to recognize and make those connections between some of the indicators that you have to, take this action, and being able to absorb it. Is that kind of how that kind of comes into play?
Well, I think yes, but before situational awareness, I think there needs to be clear expectations, and that's kind of one of the things that you go from compliance training to performance training, really setting expectations and saying this is your responsibility. So when it comes to performance, 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit number 2 is start with the end in mind. So as you're coaching performance, start with the end in mind. If you're training for an operations position, what is the product you're producing? It's good information. You want to be that ops tech or the ops manager who has that good information, who people know, okay, I can trust this person with the information, because the end in mind is your product. Okay. Better information, sales, increase revenue. So set those expectations.
So is that step 1? So let's say somebody is wanting to take some action on some of these things that we've talked about. They've started to buy in that maybe this decision-making process training makes sense, and got to figure out the situational. Well, what is step 1 for them to start moving towards that performance-based training?
Oh man, step 1 is realize that people are not a schedule. They're more of a special project. It's going to take a little bit longer. realize the 4 stages of learning. The first stage being unconscious incompetence. I've seen a lot of trainers who will be teaching a new employee and they'll say, does that make sense? And the new hire just has no idea. They don't know what they don't know. And so they'll just comply and they'll say, well, yeah, I get it. And then they're going to come to you with that same question because they don't understand what they don't understand.
Okay.
So being able to get people out of that unconscious incompetence, recognize that that's the first step of learning, that you don't know what you don't know. And to approach training with that mindset of, okay, well, now I gotta get them from unconscious incompetence to the conscious incompetence where they're aware of that they're starting to develop good questions because they're seeing their gaps. They're seeing their own gaps in knowledge.
So that you first have to realize that people are special projects. Do you mean that not everybody's the exact same way? What do you mean by special projects?
When I was in ops, there was a time that you could allot for special project. And that was kind of the one-off unique moments where you might be working on a specific daily task, and then you need to change gears to the special project. And so that's just one of those things that kind of, that just stuck with me,
Okay. Yeah. So
and
it takes
that
some
might be
special
my
time.
millennial. That might be the millennial side.
Well, it's interesting because each person is different, right? Like, and each person's unique and has their own unique needs. So that's interesting. So realizing that that each person has their own unique needs, and then there's those 4 stages of learning. So you said unconscious incompetence. What are the other stages?
We have conscious incompetence, which is I'm aware of there's stuff that I don't know, and I can start to ask the right questions. And then there's conscious competence, where you know what you know. These people make the best teachers. I'm aware of, I know what I know, and I can explain why I know it. And then we have our high performers who are unconsciously competent. It's just it's muscle memory. You'll hear that thrown around a lot. And these people make very good employees. They're great performers, but to get them to be able to slow down their thought process to explain to a new hire, okay, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's very difficult to get them out of that thought process without them being aware of it.
Yeah. I see that so often with entrepreneurs that they kind of forget what they had to go through to learn what they know. So they get so frustrated. And I know I've been in that situation too, that to have to take a step back, because sometimes you're just like, well, how are you not picking up on that? But it's like, well, because they didn't necessarily have the years of experience or some of the same experiences as you, right? So yeah, taking that step back of being aware of that gap, like you're saying, that's fantastic. So step 1, you said, is kind of realizing that each person has to go through these stages, and each person's a special project. So what would you say is like step 2?
To teaching the decision-making process, step 2. First step, realize it's going to take time.
Yeah.
Realize you're going to have to slow down. Next step, start documenting it. As you're slowing down, as you're really thinking about your thought processes, take notes. I think the next best step that you can take is, hey, when you started this job, asking your coworkers, when you started this job, what's something you wish you would have known? And you'll get just a huge swath of answers. And that's how people have had to learn. And to be able to equip your new hires with that information earlier, you could get a lot of great traction that way.
Yeah. I think it kind of comes into a conversation I was having with a client, and we were talking about documenting, and they said, well, there's whole classes on how to use this software. I said, oh, okay. There's whole classes. So people can get different results if they use this software, if they put in different information. Well, yeah. Okay. So is it acceptable if your team all gets different answers if they try to use the software? Well, no, we need to be consistent. Oh, so is there a consistent way to get the same results out of the software? Well, yeah. So you say that there's a kind of a specific way to do it. Well, yeah. Okay. So
is it more effective to have them take all those classes, or is it more effective to just go ahead and document your specific steps on how to use software to get the consistent results? Oh, yeah, I see your point.
I get it.
I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. Yeah. So when you're working with your clients, yeah, you have to kind of bring them through that awareness. You have to help them understand documenting. What's next in that process?
I'd say, well, I'm thinking about this one specific manager that
Mhm.
I've got to train and got to work with. She never had a management position, and she purchased the journal, the performance training journal, and was working her way through that. And we were on one of our calls, and she says, when I'm training a new hire, there's so much that I feel like I want to tell them. So
Mm.
that kind of comes into slow down.
Hmm.
Document this process, document this training process, so you're having these approved conversations. Back when I was in operations, one of the ways I was getting trained, one of the ways we were all getting trained was, well, think about this specific software like you're playing Tetris. That was the unofficial, and I love Tetris. I'm good at Tetris. This was nothing like playing Tetris.
Have you ever played Blockadoku?
No, I've not.
Oh, that's a fun one. Yeah, check it out. Check it out. Yeah,
I'll
that's it's
take
kind of
that.
it's a block game. You fill it in like a Sudoku, but with blocks. But anyway,
Interesting.
yeah, that's a fun one. So I love that. So because you have to slow down, it sounds like, and so you're saying after you kind of start documenting, are you saying that there's like maybe a certain order that you have to take? Like thinking about, okay, what is the progression
Mhm.
of training?
There's two thoughts there. One is
Yeah.
block style training.
Mhm.
One that style of training is, okay, you're going to focus on this one task and you're going to learn this one task for this 1 month or this 1 week. And then there's interleaving training where you're not just focused on one specific task, but you're kind of randomizing what you're doing. And this is evidence-based learning too, where train on this for 1 hour, go train on this for 1 hour. So you get a better holistic picture of the job. And even though that's going to take a little bit more time, that's going to help people connect the dots more easily. Or when I make this decision, now I can see how it affects over here, because I'm not just focusing on making this one decision over and over repetitiously, but I'm getting a better picture of the whole program. So I can help people introduce an interleaving style training program. That's
Mhm.
that's what I prefer, honestly. It might take a little bit longer, but
Hmm.
they're going to have a much better picture of the job they're performing.
Okay. So that element of making sure that what they're working on is or focusing on is being interwoven between different types of projects and different opportunities, so that kind of comes together. So it sounds like, again, it's kind of like, okay, you're understanding the different elements. So where does the rubber meet the road in terms of helping them to understand decisions that go into this? So we've kind of got like the documenting, we've kind of got that progression of
Mhm.
interweaving it together, but where does it really start to click for them, eh, that on how to make a decision when it comes to um, what they're being trained on?
That depends on the person,
Mm,
but you'll notice that as you adjust your training, their questions are getting better and more poignant for the
mm,
new hire. So that's a sign, or that's a signal that your training is working, or that their training is going well, is because, well, this question that they had on day 2 or day 3 is way more basic, and the question they might have a month later is more complex and more, okay, now let me know the why behind the why.
hmm.
So that's
Okay.
kind of where the rubber's, that's how the rubber's meeting the road.
Okay. Okay. So, in terms of this process, like when you're working with folks, tell me a
Mhm.
little bit more about that journal as well, that learning journal.
Yeah.
How does that help somebody?
Um, so first and foremost, as a tool for a manager,
Hmm.
it helps them really focus what they want to say, or defines what performance is in that specific role. and then it helps break the learning process down into call to actions. So instead of cues and keyways, the first thing you can do, documenting the training program I have, it's called Stuck Less. And I developed it because I want people to get stuck less through the training process, because there can be a lot of downtime in training. So the first 3 portions of the systems, tools, and utilization, you're documenting everything, saying, hey, this is a system you're going to be using. This is how often you're going to be using it. You can store this in an Excel. You can store this on a Word doc, but make them aware of it. And then the next portion, the C and the K, is cues and keyways, which is teach them to have that situational awareness. And then let's talk about the keyways, or the decisions that we're making. We have all this information going to this one very specific keyway, all these cues teaching us or instructing us to make a decision, understand those cues, and then understand once you make a decision, what's the effect going to be.
Okay. So the learning journal helps. So a manager, how do they use that learning journal then? Whenever they're learning information, or whenever they're trying to teach?
So I wanted to keep it pretty concise, and there's only about 15. Okay, there's 18 pages of, hey, we're going to talk about this training process. We're going to talk about performance training. Let's define performance first. Let's talk about how you know. Let's slow down your thought process. Let's get you out of that 4th stage of competency.
Mm-hmm.
And let's really slow our thought processes down to help teach the new hires. The same lady I was talking about, she said, there's so much I want to tell them. But with this journal, I realized that I really can narrow down what we have to talk about in 1 or 2 bullet points versus, okay, I'm overwhelmed with what to tell you, so let's not have that conversation. So the journal helps. Yeah.
So part of that process, you're saying, and kind of what you help folks do, is slow themselves down, understand the performance or what performance looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding what the systems, tools, and the different ways of utilizing this information look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then what needs to be documented, and then how they go about interweaving the important lessons
Mm-hmm.
to help these people to grow and understand how it all is kind of pieced together, as opposed to that block style where it sounds like it's a lot more just siloed. Well, you got to learn this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't learn how this thing fits together with kind of like this thing over here, because it's not an interwoven training process. And now, an interwoven training process, it's not just like baptism by fire. Is there some there's some thought to there? So you got to, right,
absolutely.
Okay.
And so that's what the journal helps establishes, these intentional conversations. If you can change the conversation from, hey, you're playing Tetris, which is an unofficial training lesson, to, for something that clicked for me, a gentleman said, think of it like you're babysitting. Now that he had that conversation, okay, it's clicking in my head. I'm in operations. I'm doing some babysitting. Okay, this will help me improve my information that I'm providing. Document that. Realize that the conversations taking place is think of it like a video game versus think of it like babysitting. And now that we have this new conversation that we can have, sure, you're playing Tetris and you're babysitting. Let's make those two take place together. So
maybe you're even teaching the kid how to play Tetris while you're babysitting.
It was a Tetris factory. I worked in a Tetris factory for a bit in operations. That's what that was.
That's awesome. All right. Well, hey, we've got to only like 30 seconds here. How can people get a hold of you to learn more about how to create more performance-based training?
So reach out, impactctc.com, or email me at at impactctc.com. And let's set up a time to talk and kind of get an understanding of what your company is doing, what your training process is like. Let's see how we can help formalize it, make it repeatable, and make it effective.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate your nuggets today and your wisdom and your help for all the entrepreneurs who are sending out there.
Thank you, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for being with us today. But now is the time to put what we talked about into practice. Remember, your family, employees, and community are depending on you to rise up and win. The great news is you're not alone. You're part of a resurgence of entrepreneurs who are ready to take their business, life, and impact to the next level, and we're going to do it together. This show is powered by Time for Success, where we help business owners every day who want more freedom and wealth while building a legacy of positive impact. Please follow Time for Success on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for more helpful strategies and tools for creating the business and life